Hey everybody, and welcome to the day. My name is Mr. Martin, and I'm going to be your host for the next few minutes as we get set up with some argument analysis. Now, part two of today is going to be getting involved in a little bit of a structured academic debate. And so what I want to do first is to practice looking at some of the arguments around the topic that we'll be discussing in order to prepare for that debate. So last week you read about this guy, Fred Korematsu, and he was involved in a Supreme Court case, Korematsu versus the United States. And in the background that you read last week on the Korematsu case, you read the following quote. Korematsu challenged his conviction on the grounds that the relocation orders were beyond the powers of Congress, the military authorities, and the president. He also asserted that to apply these orders only to those of Japanese ancestry amounted to illegal discrimination based on race. The government argued, however, that the exclusion and internment of Japanese Americans was justified because it was necessary to the war effort. So let's take a moment to think about his challenge to the government's argument, and his challenge to the government's argument. So what we're going to do here is you have a little bit of background on that initial internment of Japanese people and Japanese Americans. So let's look at the arguments on either side of this particular case that you started to read about last week, the Korematsu case. So these arguments would have been heard at the time that this case was in front of the Supreme Court and when Fred Korematsu was arrested. So once you hear the argument, what's going to happen is the video will pause and you'll be asked whether you think this argument is for Korematsu, is for the United States. Does this argument seem to be for both of them, like both of them could use this argument, or does it seem like neither side could really use this argument, okay? So as you're going through, the video will pause, it'll ask you which of the sides you feel like this argument is on, or if it's on both. So let's do the first one together as we're looking at these different arguments, okay? So this one says, argument number one, the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution states that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So what that means is by subjecting Japanese and Japanese Americans to internment as a group, the United States has denied them due process of law. Proper due process, and this is kind of the definition of due process as well, requires individuals to be proven guilty through individual and established procedures. Basically what that means is before you can call somebody guilty, they need to have a trial. They need to go through the process of law. And so this argument right here is saying that Fred Korematsu never really had that. And so therefore, he should not be interned. He was never given due process of law, okay? So for this one, when it pauses, you should say that this is an argument for Korematsu, okay? So now I'm gonna go through, and I'm not gonna stop anymore. I just want you to answer whether you think the argument is for Korematsu, or whether you think it's for the USA, or both or neither, okay? So here's argument number 2. Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution of the United States gives the President the power as Commander-in-Chief of the military. Commanding the military includes issuing orders as necessary to help the military carry out its duties in order to protect the nation. Such orders include Executive Order 9066, which expressly allowed restrictions on the movement and presence of groups of people in certain areas of the country. All right, here's our next argument. German Americans and Italian Americans were treated differently from the Japanese during World War II. Though some were interned and suffered discriminatory treatment, they were not gathered up in mass, meaning all together in a mass, without hearing or evidence as the Japanese were. Sorry for flubbing that one up, but see if you can answer that one, whether it's for Korematsu, the United States, both, or neither. It is impossible for the Supreme Court to confirm or deny the military authorities' claim that it was impossible to quickly separate out the disloyal and dangerous Japanese or Japanese Americans. No Japanese or Japanese American had been accused of or convicted for espionage or sabotage in the months between the attack on Pearl Harbor and the beginning of internment. When our shores in the United States are threatened by hostile forces, the power to protect should be commensurate or equal to the threatened danger. Approximately 5,000 American citizens of Japanese ancestry refused to swear unqualified allegiance, refused to pledge allegiance to the United States, and they also refused to renounce their allegiance to the Japanese emperor. Ooh, this is a big one. Okay, so the 14th Amendment of the Constitution states that no state shall deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the law. That means everybody should have equal protection of the law. So through the 14th Amendment, or though the 14th Amendment, refers to states, it also applies, because of the Fifth Amendment, it applies to the federal government, which means like Washington, D.C. and the president and all that. So the government is required to provide equal rights to everyone. If the rights of a particular racial group are taken away, the reason for doing so must pass the highest possible scrutiny. Okay. So figure out this one. Is that for both, for neither, for Korematsu, or for the United States? And take a moment to maybe read through that one again before you answer it. In the American legal system, guilt is personal and cannot be inherited from your ancestors or ancestry. There is no evidence that Fred Korematsu engaged in any subversive or conspiratorial activity. The armed forces must protect a society, not merely its constitution. Under the Alien Enemy Act of 1798, which remains in effect today, the United States may apprehend, intern, and otherwise restrict the freedom of alien enemies upon declaration of war or actual attempted or threatened invasion by a foreign nation. Kind of messed that one up. Take a moment to read that one again to make sure that you understand what exactly